The silence of space is broken by a soft hum as the camera zooms in on a once thriving human colony, now reduced to rubble. The city, which had been home to millions of humans, is now a war zone. Buildings lie in ruins, crumpled and scarred by the devastating power of alien weapons. The air is thick with smoke, the stench of burning metal and debris hanging in the air. The distant sound of explosions echoes through the streets, a reminder that this was no random attack. This was deliberate. In the heart of the chaos, the bodies of human soldiers are scattered across the battlefield. Their faces, frozen in expressions of determination and fear, lie beneath the rubble of what was once their home. The remains of advanced human technology, once the pride of humanity, are now twisted wreckage. The aliens had shown no mercy. The humans had tried to defend their colony, but the Krasin, a technologically superior species, had overwhelmed them. In the midst of this destruction, Admiral Marcus Kane stands alone in the command center, watching the carnage unfold on the large holoscreens. His face is stone-cold, eyes hard with resolve. His jaw clenched, but he says nothing, his mind processing the devastation with a chilling calmness. The reality of the situation is undeniable. The Krasin had attacked, and humanity had been caught off guard. But Admiral Kane is not a man who crumbles in the face of defeat. His mind races, planning, calculating. The Krasin had made a grave mistake in underestimating humanity. As Kane stands, lost in his thoughts, he turns his attention to the memorial wall that lines the command center. The names of the fallen are etched into the stone, and his eyes linger on one name in particular. Ben Kane, his own son. A painful lump forms in his throat as he stares at the name, but there is no time for grief. The loss of his son, his comrades, and the innocent lives that were wiped out in the attack will fuel his vengeance. He knows what has to be done. The galaxy will learn that humanity is not a species to be toyed with. The Krasin may have won the battle, but the war was far from over. The holoscreen in front of him flickers to life, showing the Krasin fleet, vast and menacing, hovering above the shattered remains of the human colony. The alien ships, sleek and deadly, radiate an aura of power and arrogance. On board the flagship, General Varric, the Krasin commander, is seen boasting of their victory. His voice, cold and dismissive, echoes across the ship. "They thought they could fight us," General Varric sneers, looking down at the human planet. "Foolish creatures, they are nothing but insects beneath our feet." The Krasin soldiers cheer, their victory already seeming certain. They believe humanity has been crushed, that no resistance will come from the pathetic species that dared challenge them. But what they don't realize is that, in their arrogance, they've awakened something far more dangerous than they could ever imagine. Meanwhile, Admiral Kane, still watching the Krasin fleet from his command center, quietly speaks into the comm system, addressing Earth's global network. His voice, cold and calculated, is broadcast to every corner of the human colonies. "You have made the mistake of thinking humans are weak." Kane's voice booms through every speaker. "Now you will learn what happens when we get angry. No one will stop us." The words hang in the air like a thunderclap, sending a chill down the spine of anyone who hears them. There is a fire in his voice, a fury that has been building since the moment the Krasin first attacked. The weight of his words is heavy, but it's not just about vengeance, it's a warning. As the screen fades to black, the camera cuts to a massive fleet of human warships, cloaked and undetected, moving through the vastness of space. Their advanced stealth technology allows them to approach the Krasin stronghold without being seen. These ships are not just battleships, they are symbols of humanity's resolve. Each one is armed to the teeth with state-of-the-art weaponry, cloaking devices, and AI-driven tactical systems. The fleet moves like a shadow, slipping through the darkness, undetected by the Krasin sensors. They are coming, and the Krasin have no idea what is about to hit them. The tension builds, the air thick with anticipation. The final confrontation between the two species is inevitable. The humans, who have been mocked and underestimated for far too long, are about to show the galaxy what they are capable of. But how will the Krasin respond? Will they even be able to comprehend the fury they have unleashed? As the human fleet draws closer to their target, the screen fades to black once more. The only sound is the low hum of the ships as they glide silently through the stars. The viewers are left on the edge of their seats, wondering what will happen next. How will humanity fight back? Will they succeed in their mission of vengeance? The suspense lingers as the audience is left craving the next chapter of this epic tale. The Krasin may have made their mistake, but they have no idea just how dangerous the humans can be when they're pushed too far. The story has only just begun, and the galaxy is about to witness the full force of human wrath. The stars above the Krasin mining colony shone dimly, the peaceful blackness of space an ironic contrast to the chaos below. The Krasin had believed they were untouchable, with their superior technology and vast empire. But the humans had something the Krasin didn't: an unyielding spirit, an unbreakable will to survive. Admiral Marcus Kane's fleet moved quietly through the vastness of space, cloaked by technology that made them virtually invisible. As the ships drifted silently toward their target, the humans aboard were preparing for one of the most dangerous and crucial missions of their lives. They knew what was at stake: revenge for the destruction of their colonies, the annihilation of their people, and the untold suffering of their families. As the Krasin continued their exploitation of the human mining colonies, they had no idea that a storm was about to hit. The Krasin were used to being the predators, the ones who controlled everything in the galaxy, but now the tables were about to turn. Humanity's anger was brewing, and they were ready to unleash it in full force. The fleet descended upon the Krasin mining station with deadly precision. Hundreds of cloaked human warships appeared without warning, swarming the station like a swarm of angry bees. The Krasin were slow to react, still overconfident in their defenses. But the humans weren't here to play by the Krasin's rules. They had studied the enemy's weaknesses, and they had come prepared with cutting-edge technology and a thirst for vengeance. The Krasin were used to overwhelming their opponents with sheer numbers and firepower. But this time, they had no such advantage. Humanity had learned from the past. They had adapted, evolved, and were now using tactics the Krasin couldn't predict. The humans struck from all directions, their ships launching precision attacks on key points of the mining colony. Their AI-controlled weapon systems operated with deadly efficiency, their algorithms programmed to strike with pinpoint accuracy. The Krasin scrambled to react, but they were already too late. The humans had already outmaneuvered them. In the midst of the chaos, Bonner, a battle-hardened human soldier, led his team into the heart of the Krasin defense. Bonner wasn't a young man, but his experience in battle had made him one of the most respected soldiers in the fleet. His eyes burned with anger, a fire that had been kindled when he lost his younger brother during the initial Krasin attack. The pain of that loss still haunted him, but it also fueled him. His brother's death would not be in vain. As Bonner and his squad stormed the Krasin defenses, they were met with fierce resistance. The Krasin had advanced technology, but humanity had something far more dangerous: unpredictability. Bonner's squad used every trick in the book, launching surprise attacks and setting traps that caught the Krasin off guard. The humans had the advantage of adaptability, something the Krasin could never have prepared for. The Krasin soldiers, though formidable in their own right, couldn't match the ingenuity of the human soldiers. Bonner's team fought with a precision and teamwork that was beyond the Krasin's understanding. Powered exoskeletons gave the humans an edge, allowing them to move with lightning speed and strength, while their high-tech weapons tore through Krasin defenses. Explosions rocked the colony, lighting up the night sky like fireworks. The air was thick with smoke, the sound of gunfire, and screams echoing in every direction. Bonner's team advanced, pushing deeper into the colony, cutting through the Krasin like a hot knife through butter. But even in the middle of battle, Bonner found a moment to pause. He stood for a moment, looking at the carnage around him. His eyes flickered to his team, their faces grim. their eyes hardened by years of war. They were all fighting for something greater than themselves. They were fighting for the future of humanity, for their fallen comrades, for those they had lost, and for those they still hoped to protect. Bonner turned to one of his soldiers, a young man named Davis, who was struggling to reload his weapon. Bonner placed a hand on his shoulder. "Keep your head in the fight, Davis. We don't stop until every last one of them pays for what they did." Davis nodded, his face grim. Bonner could see the pain in his eyes, the same pain he had seen in his own eyes when he had lost his brother. They were all fighting for the same reason now. It wasn't just about winning the battle. It was about making sure the Krazen would never again think they could do whatever they wanted to humanity without facing the consequences. The humans continued to push forward, relentlessly cutting down the Krazen forces. The Krazen, in their arrogance, had never expected such a fierce counterattack. Their ships were falling, one after another, as human warships rained down destruction on them from above. The Krazen, once the most powerful empire in the galaxy, were now scrambling to survive. But it wasn't just the ships that were falling. The Krazen soldiers were being torn apart on the ground as well. The human soldiers were everywhere, using their superior tactics to outsmart the Krazen at every turn. They fought with a fire that the Krazen had never seen before, a fire that only came from the need for revenge. Bonner's team made their way toward the central control room of the Krazen station. It was heavily fortified, but Bonner had one last trick up his sleeve. He activated a cloaking device, rendering the squad invisible as they slipped past Krazen defenses. They were almost there. As they entered the control room, Bonner's squad unleashed a final devastating assault. The Krazen officers, caught by surprise, were overwhelmed by the human speed and precision. The human soldiers moved like ghosts, their exoskeletons providing them with strength and agility that the Krazen could never match. When the last Krazen officer fell, Bonner stood over the fallen alien, his chest heaving. He looked at the wreckage of the control room, knowing this was only the beginning. There was more to be done, more Krazen to hunt down. The war had just begun. But for Bonner and his team, this victory was personal. The battle was not just about winning, it was about avenging everything they had lost. And as they looked out at the burning Krazen station, they knew that the Krazen would never forget the wrath of humanity. Humanity had endured. Humanity had struck back. And they weren't going to stop until the Krazen had been brought to their knees. The tension in space was palpable, a silent standoff that hung like a dark cloud over the battlefield. The Krazen, in all their technological superiority, had underestimated the humans, an error they were now painfully aware of. The destruction of their mining colony had left them reeling, and in the heart of their mothership, the leaders of the Krazen Empire seethed with anger. The humans had dared to fight back. Now, they would make them pay. At the Krazen Command Center, the screens flickered with images of the human fleet advancing toward them. Their ships, though fewer in number, were more agile and more ruthless than the Krazen had anticipated. But there was something else the Krazen had not accounted for: human ingenuity and determination. The Krazen generals knew the humans had no intention of stopping at the mining colony. They were coming for the heart of the Krazen Empire itself. And so, the Krazen Empire made a decision. It was time to unleash their ultimate weapon. The Obliterator, a warship the size of a small moon, was their secret weapon. Equipped with devastating energy cannons capable of obliterating entire planets, it was an indomitable force. The Krazen had never used it before, but now, it was their only hope for turning the tide of the war. The humans had no idea what was coming. As the Obliterator charged up its massive energy weapons, the Krazen fleet moved into position. It was a moment of anticipation, a calm before the storm. But the humans were already aware that the Krazen were about to strike back. They just didn't know how devastating the blow would be. Admiral Marcus Kane, leader of the human fleet, sat in the command center of his flagship, his gaze fixed on the massive holographic display in front of him. The Obliterator was a giant looming over the battlefield, a symbol of the Krasin's destructive power. But Kane wasn't afraid. If anything, he was more determined than ever to defeat the Krasin. The humans had already struck a blow against the Krasin's arrogance, and now it was time to strike again. Kane turned to his commanders, a group of hardened veterans who had fought alongside him for years. They knew the odds were against them. The Obliterator was almost invincible, and the Krasin were prepared to use it to wipe out the human fleet once and for all. "We need to take it down," Kane said, his voice low and filled with resolve. "This isn't just about survival anymore. This is about making sure the Krasin know what happens when they underestimate us. We need a plan, and we need it fast." The commanders nodded, their expressions grim. They knew the task ahead of them was nearly impossible. The Krasin had advanced technology on their side, and the Obliterator was a force unlike anything humanity had ever encountered. But if anyone could do it, it was Admiral Kane and his fleet. "We have the cloaking devices," Commander Jack said, his fingers tapping rapidly on the control panel. "If we can get close enough, we can launch a surprise attack. But we'll need to time it perfectly. One wrong move, and the Obliterator will blast us out of the sky." Kane nodded. "We'll need to split the fleet. Some of us will take the direct approach, distract the Krasin fleet, and force them to focus their energy on us. The rest of you will move in from behind, use the cloaking devices to stay hidden, and strike when the moment is right." The plan was risky, dangerously so, but there was no other choice. The Krasin had already made their move, and now the humans had to respond. With the plan in place, the human fleet began its approach. The ships moved in, cloaked and undetected, as they prepared to execute their daring maneuver. The stars twinkled in the distance, a cold reminder of the vastness of space and the battle that was about to unfold. As the human fleet drew closer, the first signs of battle began to emerge. The Krasin, though focused on the Obliterator, had already begun to detect the human fleet's movements. Their sensors, more advanced than anything the humans had, were picking up on the slightest distortions in space caused by the cloaked ships. The human fleet advanced cautiously, knowing they couldn't afford to be detected. Any mistake now could be their last. The tension grew with every passing second as the ships inched closer to the Krasin defenses. Kane's ship, the flagship, was positioned at the heart of the fleet, and he watched the screens closely, his eyes narrowing as he awaited the moment to strike. Then it happened. A flash of light, a pulse of energy that ripped through space. A Krasin ship had detected a cloaked vessel, and the battle had begun. The Krasin opened fire, and the first volley of energy blasts sent shockwaves through space. The sound of laser fire echoed across the void, the beams racing toward their targets with unrelenting speed. The humans fired back, their weapons striking with deadly precision. Ships twisted and turned, weaving through debris and the wreckage of destroyed vessels, as both sides exchanged fire. The human warships, though smaller and less advanced in terms of firepower, had one major advantage: speed. They zipped through the chaos, avoiding the full brunt of the Krasin's devastating energy blasts. Kane's ship darted through the field of fire, narrowly avoiding a direct hit. The crew braced themselves as the energy beams whizzed past them, the ship shaking under the force of the near miss. "Damage report," Kane barked, his voice steady despite the chaos surrounding them. "Minor damage to the starboard side, but nothing critical," came the quick response from the engineering team. "We're good to go, sir." Kane didn't waste time. "Keep moving. All ships, maintain evasive maneuvers. We're not done yet." The fleet continued to maneuver through the debris and destruction. The Krasin fired relentlessly, their weapons capable of vaporizing entire ships with a single shot. The human ships evaded, twisting and turning in a dance of survival, each moment more precarious than the last. But the tension didn't end there. Kane's ship, already damaged from the near miss, was forced to make an emergency repair mid-fight. The crew scrambled to patch up the damaged systems, knowing that if they didn't get it right, they could be sitting ducks for the next barrage of Krasin energy blasts. As the battle raged on, Kane's mind raced. They were still in the fight, but the odds were shifting against them. The Krasin were beginning to overwhelm their smaller fleet. The Obliterator was still intact, its massive weapons aimed at the heart of the human forces. But Kane refused to give up. Humanity had faced worse odds and emerged victorious. They had something the Krasin would never have: a refusal to back down. The battle was far from over, but humanity's fury had just begun to show its true strength. The moment had arrived. The human fleet, battered but not broken, was ready to launch its final, desperate assault. The Obliterator, the Krasin warship of unimaginable power, loomed in space, its immense size casting a shadow over the battlefield. The Krasin had unleashed their ultimate weapon, believing it would be enough to crush the human resistance. They had been wrong. The humans had regrouped. They had trained, adapted, and learned from every mistake. Their strategy was simple but bold. They would board the Obliterator itself, infiltrate its massive structure, and destroy it from the inside. It was a suicide mission, one that would require every ounce of courage and sacrifice. But the humans were no strangers to impossible odds. At the heart of the human fleet, a small, specialized assault ship called the Reaper sat ready. Its sleek, dark hull blended into the cold depths of space, its engines powered up and ready to engage. The Reaper was designed for close-quarters combat, a vessel small enough to infiltrate enemy ships and large enough to carry a full team of soldiers. And this time, it carried Admiral Marcus Kane and the best of humanity's elite soldiers. They were about to take the fight to the heart of the Krasin Empire itself. Kane stood at the front of the command center, his eyes steely and unwavering. He knew that the plan was a long shot. The Krasin would fight with everything they had. But the human spirit, the refusal to give up, was something the Krasin could never fully comprehend. This was their final chance to turn the tide of the war. "Everyone knows their role," Kane said, his voice steady despite the gravity of the mission. "We board the Obliterator, fight our way through, and take out their reactor core. This ship will be our grave or our salvation. We either end this fight here, or we die trying. Are you ready?" A chorus of nods and quiet affirmations filled the room. Each soldier knew the stakes. This mission wasn't just about saving humanity. It was about avenging the countless lives lost in the earlier battles. Among those lost was Bonner's brother, and Bonner had made it his personal mission to make the Krasin pay for the life they had stolen. The plan was set in motion. The Reaper's engines roared to life as it detached from the human fleet, swiftly maneuvering toward the towering silhouette of the Obliterator. The Krasin warship was a fortress in space, brimming with soldiers and advanced defense systems. It was the perfect representation of Krasin arrogance. They believed no one could breach its walls, but they were wrong. The Reaper zipped through the dark expanse, cloaking itself to avoid detection. It would need to make a perfect entry into the Obliterator, through one of its less defended docking bays. As they neared the ship, Kane's eyes never wavered from the screen. His mind was already in the thick of the fight, strategizing their every move. "Prepare for boarding," Kane ordered. The atmosphere aboard the Reaper was thick with anticipation. The soldiers, clad in powered exoskeletons and armed with high-tech weaponry, checked their gear one last time. Their faces were set, determined, but there was a quiet understanding among them that many of them might not return. Bonner, now a hardened leader, stood at the front of the team, his face grim. His brother's death still haunted him, and this mission was his chance for revenge. The Krasin had taken too much from him, and he wasn't about to let them win. He had made a promise to his brother, to fight until the Krasin were no more. As the Reaper docked with the Obliterator, the doors slid open, and the soldiers flooded into the enemy ship. The halls were dark, cold, and eerily silent. The smell of alien technology and burned metal lingered in the air. The Krasin were waiting, But they hadn't expected the humans to reach this far. They were unprepared for the sheer ferocity of the human assault. Bonner led the charge, his rifle raised, and his eyes scanning every corner of the corridor. The first wave of Krasin guards appeared, elite soldiers clad in powerful armor, their weapons crackling with energy. The humans fired without hesitation, their weapons striking with deadly precision. The air was filled with the sound of gunfire and the shrill screams of dying Krasin. Despite the odds, the humans fought with an intensity that the Krasin had never seen before. They were driven by anger, by loss, and by an unshakable will to survive. Every inch of ground was hard-fought, and the humans pressed forward, determined to reach the heart of the Obliterator. Bonner's team moved quickly through the ship, fighting off wave after wave of Krasin soldiers. The battle was brutal. The corridors were narrow, and the fighting was close quarters, hand to hand. Explosions rocked the ship, sending debris flying through the air. Every soldier knew that their survival depended on quick, decisive action. The Krasin guards were fierce, but they were not prepared for the ferocity of the human soldiers. With every battle, the humans' resolve grew stronger, and their tactics became more unpredictable. They moved with precision, overwhelming the Krasin defenses at every turn. But then, as the humans neared the reactor core, they were met with a new wave of Krasin soldiers, stronger, faster, and more ruthless than any they had faced before. Bonner's heart raced as the fight intensified. He could feel the weight of the mission pressing down on him. This was the moment. They were so close, but they weren't done yet. It was then that Bonner made a decision that would change everything. He had reached the reactor core, but the Krasin were closing in on them. The room was filling with smoke, and the enemy was closing in fast. There was no time to wait for reinforcements. The only way to ensure the destruction of the Obliterator was to sacrifice himself. Bonner looked at his team, his face resolute. "This is it," he said. "You get out of here. I'll take care of the reactor." One of the soldiers, a young man who had fought alongside Bonner throughout the mission, shook his head. "You can't do this, Bonner. We can't lose you." But Bonner was already moving toward the reactor. "We've lost enough already. This ends now." With a final, determined look, Bonner activated the detonation sequence, setting the reactor to overload. The explosion that followed was catastrophic. The ship shook violently as fire and smoke filled the corridors, tearing through the structure of the Obliterator. The walls seemed to tremble, and the sound of the explosion reverberated through the entire ship. As the humans made their way back to the Reaper, the entire Krasin flagship was in chaos. The reactor's explosion had destabilized the ship's core, and it was moments away from total destruction. The human soldiers moved quickly, carrying the fallen and fighting through the carnage. Bonner had given his life to ensure their victory. The Obliterator was no more. The Krasin flagship had been destroyed, and the human fleet had delivered a crushing blow to the Krasin Empire. As the human soldiers boarded the Reaper and returned to the fleet, they knew the battle was far from over. But they had made their point. They had shown the Krasin the true power of humanity, the power of unity, of resilience, and of unwavering determination. The Krasin had underestimated them, and now they would never forget the price of their arrogance. The destruction of the Obliterator sent ripples through the Krasin Empire. It was an event that no one could have predicted. A human fleet, outnumbered and underestimated, had managed to destroy their flagship. The Krasin, once so sure of their victory, were now facing a reality they couldn't ignore. Their greatest weapon, their pride and joy, had been obliterated by humans, an enemy they had once dismissed as insignificant. The shockwave of the explosion reached the farthest corners of the Krasin Empire, rattling the very foundations of their military might. Word spread quickly. The humans had won, and the once confident Krasin were now left with fear, doubt, and uncertainty. The very notion of surrender was something the Krasin had never considered, yet now it seemed like their only option. The human fleet, emboldened by their victory, was on the move, and nothing would stop them. As the remaining Krasin forces scrambled to regroup, their morale crumbled. The Krasin soldiers who had once fought with fierce confidence now questioned their chances. The invincible Krasin Empire, feared by so many across the galaxy, was faltering under the weight of their own arrogance. They had underestimated the humans, and now they were paying the price. The human fleet pressed forward, their commanders and soldiers driven by one singular goal: victory. The humans knew that this was their moment to end the war once and for all. They had fought too long, sacrificed too much, to let the Krasin escape now. The Krasin had been given a chance to surrender, to negotiate peace, but they refused. The final battle loomed on the horizon, and the human fleet was determined to make the Krasin pay for their aggression. The battle took place on a massive scale, with human ships and Krasin warships clashing in space. Explosions lit up the darkness as fleets collided, each side giving their all. The Krasin attempted one last stand, launching their remaining forces in a desperate bid to protect their empire. But the humans were relentless, pushing deeper into enemy territory with the full force of their rage and determination. Amid the chaos, Admiral Kane led the charge. He had seen the cost of war firsthand, and he had lost too much to stop now. His eyes were filled with a burning desire for justice, for every life lost, for every sacrifice made. The Krasin had taken so much, but the humans had taken something even more precious: their will to fight. They would not stop until every last Krasin ship was destroyed, every Krasin soldier was defeated. Kane knew that this battle was not just about military superiority. It was about the human spirit, the indomitable will to survive and to fight for what was right. The Krasin had underestimated that spirit, and now they would pay the ultimate price. As the human fleet closed in on the Krasin command center, Kane's voice crackled through the comms, giving orders with the precision of a man who had seen it all. "We push forward. No retreat. No mercy. We end this now." The final assault on the Krasin command center was intense. The humans fought their way through the last of the Krasin defenses, each step taking them closer to the heart of the enemy's empire. Waves of Krasin soldiers attempted to hold them back, but the human soldiers fought with everything they had. They had lost too much to let the Krasin win now. Inside the command center, Kane's team breached the main control room, where the Krasin leader awaited them. He was tall, imposing, and clad in battle armor that made him look like a god of war. But despite his power, he was facing the wrath of a species that had been pushed to the brink. Kane's eyes locked onto the Krasin leaders as he entered the room, and for a moment, everything was silent. The two enemies stood in the same space, separated by nothing but hatred. The battle that followed was brutal. The Krasin leader fought with the strength of an entire empire behind him, but it was no match for the fury in Kane's eyes. Every strike from Kane's team was fueled by the memory of Bonner's sacrifice, by the loss of every soldier who had fought and died to get them to this point. The Krasin had taken so much from the humans, but now it was time to make them pay. Kane and the Krasin leader clashed in hand-to-hand combat, their movements fast and deadly. The sound of metal against metal echoed through the room as they fought. Kane's mind was focused entirely on one thing: victory. He had seen his people suffer, and now it was time to end it. With one final strike, he drove his blade into the Krasin leader's chest, ending the fight. The room fell silent as the Krasin leader crumpled to the ground. The humans had won. The Krasin Empire, once so powerful and feared, was now in ruins. As the human fleet celebrated their victory, Admiral Kane stood alone, staring out into the vast emptiness of space. He thought of Bonner, of his sacrifice, of the countless lives lost in the fight. Kane had seen so many die, and now it was time to reflect on what they had accomplished. The Krasin were defeated, but the cost had been high. In a moment of quiet reflection, Kane spoke to his troops. "They thought they could break us, but they only made us stronger." His voice carried across the comms, and every soldier, every pilot, every warrior who had fought in this war heard his words. It was a message of resilience, of strength, of hope. The humans had endured. They had fought through the darkest of times, and now they had emerged victorious. They had proven that no matter how powerful the enemy, no matter how hopeless the situation, the human spirit could never be defeated. The Krasin had fallen, and the galaxy would never forget the lesson that humanity had taught them. Never underestimate the strength of a species that will fight to protect its people, its values, and its future. The humans had shown the universe that when pushed to the brink, they would rise, stronger, fiercer, and more determined than ever before. As the last remnants of the Krasin fleet scattered in defeat, the human fleet gathered together in a moment of triumph. The war was over. The Krasin Empire had been brought to its knees. But the humans, with all their flaws, had proven one thing. When the humans get angry, no one can stop them. The Krasin Empire had fallen. After everything, the countless battles, the sacrifices, the struggle, the once mighty alien empire was now on its knees. The humans, whom the Krasin had deemed insignificant, had turned the tide and struck a blow so powerful that it sent shockwaves across the galaxy. The Krasin had been forced to surrender, unable to withstand the fury and unity of humanity. It was a moment of triumph that the galaxy would never forget. With the Krasin Empire defeated, the Galactic Council made its move. They could no longer ignore the power of Earth and its people. No longer would Earth be seen as a weakling, a backwater planet on the fringes of the galaxy. No longer would the humans be dismissed as insignificant. The defeat of the Krasin Empire had proven one undeniable truth. Humanity was a force to be reckoned with, and the galaxy had taken notice. As the Krasin leaders reluctantly agreed to surrender, the entire galaxy watched. The humans, once an afterthought in the grand scheme of things, had shown their strength. They had won not just a war, but the respect of every race and civilization in the galaxy. The Galactic Council, long dismissive of Earth's potential, now looked at humanity with a mixture of awe and fear. The humans had earned their place among the stars. On Earth, the news of the victory spread like wildfire. People celebrated in the streets, their hearts filled with pride. But amid the celebrations, there was a somber atmosphere. The cost of victory had been high, and many had paid the ultimate price. Humanity had lost heroes, soldiers, and loved ones in the fight. The victory was sweet, but it was also bittersweet. To honor those who had fallen, a ceremony was held in the heart of the capital. It was a moment of reflection, a time to remember the sacrifices made by those who had given everything for Earth's survival. The ceremony was simple but meaningful. The air was thick with emotion as the families of the fallen gathered together to honor their loved ones. Vonner, the soldier who had led the charge and made the ultimate sacrifice, was remembered as a hero. His name was etched into the memorial wall alongside the others who had given their lives. The crowd stood in silence as the names of the fallen were read aloud, each name a reminder of the price paid for peace. Bonner's sacrifice had been the turning point in the war, and his memory would live on forever in the hearts of the people. Admiral Kane, the leader who had guided humanity through the darkest days of the war, stood at the front of the ceremony. His face was stoic, but his eyes betrayed the weight of everything he had experienced. He had seen the horrors of war, the death, the destruction, and the loss. But he had also seen the resilience of the human spirit, the unwavering determination that had carried them to victory. As the ceremony drew to a close, Admiral Kane stepped forward to deliver a speech. His voice was steady, yet it carried the power of a man who had lived through the fire of battle and emerged stronger. "We stand here today, not just as survivors," he began, "but as victors. We have proven to the galaxy that when the humans get angry, no one can stop us. And we will continue to prove that every day." The crowd erupted in applause, their cheers echoing through the square. The humans had won, and they had earned their place in the galaxy. But there was more to come. The galaxy was vast, and humanity had only just begun to explore its possibilities. In the months that followed, Earth began to play a major role in galactic diplomacy. No longer relegated to the sidelines, Humanity was now a key player in the politics of the galaxy. The Galactic Council, recognizing the strength and resolve of the humans, invited Earth to participate in important discussions and decisions. Earth's voice was now heard across the stars, and humanity's influence began to grow. The Krazen, now a defeated empire, were forced to acknowledge the power of their former enemies. They had underestimated humanity, and now they would have to live with the consequences. The galaxy was changing, and Earth was at the center of it all. For the first time in history, humans were seen as equals among the stars. As Admiral Kane looked out at the stars, he knew that the war was over, but the work was just beginning. The victory over the Krazen was only the first step in a much larger journey. The galaxy was full of new opportunities, new challenges, and new allies. Humanity had proven that they could stand tall, even in the face of overwhelming odds. And now it was time to build something lasting, something that would ensure the future of Earth and its people for generations to come. Kane's final words, spoken during the ceremony, echoed in the hearts of every human. The galaxy now knows that when the humans get angry, no one can stop them. As the camera pulled away from Earth, the scene shifted to the vastness of space. The stars twinkled in the distance, each one a reminder of the infinite possibilities that awaited humanity. The humans had earned their place in the galaxy, and the future looked bright. Earth was no longer just a small, insignificant planet in the vastness of space. It was a force to be reckoned with, a power that could change the course of history. The camera panned across the human fleet, now united and stronger than ever, as they prepared for the challenges ahead. The Krazen had been defeated, but there were many more challenges to come. The galaxy was vast, and humanity's journey had only just begun. But one thing was certain: the humans had proven their strength, and they were ready to face whatever came next. The new era had begun, and Earth was no longer just a planet. Earth was a power, and the galaxy would never forget the lesson it had learned. When the humans get angry, no one can stop them.